And the short session 4 is happening as part of the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival. And one of the documentaries, and you may have seen an interview I did previously with Jary Nemo and Lucinda Horrocks about their documentary Harbour Lights. Welcome again to Movie Metropolis and to MDFF.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Good to talk to you again, and this is about the Mission to Seafarers, the Ladies Harbour Lights Guild, etc. Let's just remind everyone about how what are the origins of this documentary? How did it all come about?
Well, the film, we worked with, the Mission to Seafarers, which Melburnians will know there's a very interesting, iconic building at the bottom of Flinders Street down near the Docklands, which has a dome on it. But not a lot of people realise that it's a 100-year-old building called the Mission to Seafarers, which was built to service this amazing industry, which was merchant seafaring that connected Melbourne and Australia to the world. At that time, it's a really vibrant place. And so we were commissioned, we got some funding from the Victorian government to tell a history about that building and the seafarers that used it and the seafaring life that happened around that time. And also to tell the story of a really interesting group of women who were supporters of the Mission to Seafarers, and they were called the Ladies Harbour Lights Guild, and they were a group of sort of the who's who of Melbourne, who were really dedicated volunteers trying to improve the life of seafarers, and we wanted to celebrate their story as well.
Well, certainly you've done that in this documentary. Tell me about the challenges in putting it together and the use of archival photos and footage and interviews, etc.
Well, I can probably go with that. I mean, our largest challenge, I think, was that this was not a story that had much research attached to it. And it came about from a series of images that were found under the stage. There's a stage in the main auditorium and bar area of the building, and when they were cleaning it out, they found a box of photographs, as you will, and that set them off on a journey. But when we came in, there wasn't very much primary research involved, so we spent a lot of time working through that and interviewing people and talking to them and trying to find the actual story. And there was very little on the Ladies Harbour Lights as a group of women, and there was very little on. I mean, there was some beautiful photographs. There were some exhibitions that had come about the building, and then we were very fortunate to find some gorgeous old footage of Melbourne that very few people had seen before. And we also found some quite wonderful Second World War and First World War footage. First World War footage and Second World War transport ships, and we came across just astounding imagery, and having a sort of a nautical network. We were surprised to see when we showed it to people. People were very surprised to see this footage or images, small things that experts will pick up on that a general audience or us as filmmakers wouldn't understand. But when we put an image up, they'd say, "My God, where did you find that? I've never seen an image of a sail maker from the islands or something." Or it's like there were some really and beautiful old square riggers that and an actual shot of I didn't have the heart to put it on, but there's a shot of a square rigger being sunk during the First World War by a submarine, and it's torpedoed, and you see it go down, and it's I didn't have room, but also it was a very sad sight to see that. It was sort of like the history changing over, if you like. So there was some interesting content involved. We were very lucky to come across that, I think.
And what your film demonstrates, Harbour Lights, is we have such a rich history in Australia, and there's so much to unearth about our past and about events that people don't recognise or understand. So it's great that you are able to show this in your documentary.
Yeah, it's wonderful, isn't it? Some of the imagery from Melbourne, which surprised me as just what a metropolis it was in that period of time and how modern it looked. And it's very reminiscent of the films that you see from New York City with with the cabs in the street and the sort of people that are around, and it's such a vibrant looking space. And to find that that Melbourne was the centre of transportation as well. So that area where the docks were was just phenomenally busy. There was so much going on down there, and factories and all sorts of things happening. And a bit like today, where you're going to Melbourne once a month or something, and all the buildings seem to have moved, and they've rebuilt something where the shop was, and it was very similar to that. The whole dock area was endlessly being rebuilt, completely reshaped, and there was water in places where there wasn't water before, and one of the sad things, I guess, was that they actually built 2 buildings down there, which not many people probably know, but they actually they raised the money to build a building.
This is
and
the mission
building, they raised the money, built one, and the Harbour Works said they had to move it. As soon as they'd finished building it, they decided they'd knock it down because they had to make way for a bypass or for some docks. And so they raised the money again and built another one. It's they're amazing buildings. And so not many people know that it was the usual administrative thing of just, good God, we raised the money during the First World War. You can imagine trying to find money for things during the First World War. That's what the ladies did. So there's some lovely histories in that. I digress.
But what an incredible story, again, that is so important for a film like this to reveal, because not many people know this at all. And that's the beauty of documentaries like yours. So in terms of juggling everything, the interviews, the footage and so on, the editing process must be a very interesting one in terms of what you decide remains in the film and what has to be removed.
Yes, you should.
Do you want me to go again? Yeah, well, because we work in short form, we've chosen that form. It's always there's always so much that you have to miss out of the story, but that's true no matter how long the film is. There's never going to be enough room in the film to get everything in, and so it's always very interesting to try and both put the content in that you'd like to put in, but also leave enough space in the film, because it's really important to leave air in a film and not barrage an audience, so that they have, well, in my opinion, so that they have time to digest what they're seeing and what they're hearing and what they're feeling before you move on to the next part. And so trying to get everything in and do that is probably the hardest thing. Very quickly make the mistake of putting a lot of content in, or a lot of series of dates and names and places, and as if it's an appendix. But then no one feels anything, and no one gets a feeling of what the time was like, or there's no room for the music to take effect, or any of those things. So laying all those things together. We spend a lot of time over it. And
you're right, and things that the audience might not register, we take a lot of time over, like perhaps we spend a lot of time thinking about the audio, or Jary did with the audio. So there's a lot of effects of the wind over the ocean during a storm, or the flapping of the sails on a mast, or trying to find music contemporary to the era, and then the beautiful music that we also had from composer Rick Chu. That I often, I'm not the editor, Jary's the editor, so I do a lot of the research of, well, here's some archival footage, Jary, here's 100 beautiful photographs of Melbourne in huge high quality, and then I sort of leave him with this pile. and I come back and there's magic. I always love that. I love watching you edit it, actually.
Thanks. I don't think you like watching the edit. I think you like when I've finished editing, rather than sitting for 40 hours of while I'm agonising over one small animation that no one noticed.
Yeah, you're probably right. I should stay away
when
from
I'm overdoing it. But, yeah.
Yeah, animations too. There's some animations in fun.
Yeah, there's a lot of, well, you know, what is actually animation, but people are not realising that they're seeing animation in moving image. You know, putting moving image together with stills is, you know, the origin rostrum cameras and original animation. So all of that structural work of getting an audience from one place to another using moving images, using still images and as moving images. Then there's a lot in that. We spent a lot of time over that, over trying to make it as totally unconfronting, I suppose you'd say, just not noticed. Seamless, yeah. That's the word. Try and make it seamless so that you're not actually seeing the effects. The effects are all there, but you're not, you know, they're not standing out as effects. All you're doing is going with the story, hopefully. And I'm not being too heavy-handed.
Absolutely, it's the whole filmmaking process, which takes a lot of time and a lot of energy. And again, well done with Harbour Lights. So now that the film is screening as part of the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival, how else is the film being screened?
It has been screened at and internationally. So the Carmarthen Bay Film Festival screened it in 2021 as well, and also Setting Sun Film Festival in Yarraville. Sadly, these have all been COVID impacted events, so it hasn't actually been shown in a cinema to a face-to-face audience since it did have one showing when it was launched in February 2020. Remember that time?
Faded memory.
In Melbourne, there was an audience that saw it in Melbourne face-to-face, which we're really grateful for. But it is our philosophy and our practice is to release our material to the public for free, Creative Commons. So it can actually be seen from the Wind and Sky Productions website and also the Mission to Seafarers website, as well as a community resource. So yeah, there are chances to see it, but we'd love to see it shown to a proper audience one day.
Absolutely. Hopefully that will happen. And yes, I can see a built-in audience, as you say, that which you're already catering for. And I can also see an educative function in terms of your documentary about our past and how and women's role in that past that has not been properly explored. And so there might be some more opportunities in terms of education, schools, all that sort of thing.
Yes, you're right. And we haven't really emphasised that it is telling and celebrating a story of women, which in that period, that sort of turn of the 20th century, you know, those stories are starting to be unearthed and told and celebrated, but there's still a lot of work to do in it. And we're really, I mean, it's fun to work in this space because the stories haven't been told. So it's often surprising to go, oh, wow, there was this group of sort of really professional network that was doing all of this amazing behind the scenes work. How come I haven't heard the name Ethel Godfrey before, or the Ladies Harbour Lights Guild before? And wow, they were interconnected with all of these other amazing women's groups. So there's a lot of work to be done, I think, in sort of joining up those dots. So yeah, but you make a good point. Maybe we should have an education package or something and send it through to the, yeah. Good point, Peter. We'll try and market to the education industry.
Well, you might want to work with ATOM, Australian Teachers of Media. They do so much with so many films for educational support and services and information and so on. So yeah, you might want to work with them. I'm intrigued. Are you both working on any other projects at the moment?
Oh yeah. We're always both working on projects and pitching new projects endlessly. We've been doing a lot of pitching because we haven't been able to go out filming for quite some time. So we've had one on the back of a burner. which we just keep wanting to go and shoot, and every time we go out to do it, something gets locked down. So, but that's on Indigenous heroism in Victoria during the, particularly during the gold prospecting period. And so, so there's lots and lots, amazingly again, history we mostly don't know. Lots and lots of stories of First Nations people doing all sorts of things, saving people from fires and floods and shipwrecks and, you know, amazingly, and a lot of them. We're talking hundreds of stories, not one or two. So that's a really intriguing story that Fred Carr, who we've worked on a couple of films with Fred. One was The Missing, another one about women in Australia, groups of women in Australia doing amazing things. But he's an expert from Federation University Australia, and he's made a map with a group called CERDI, and they're mapping all of the stories. So you'll be able to click on a map and read excerpts from different stories, and we're making an overarching documentary about that. Well, we're meant to as soon as we're allowed outside.
Yeah, that's been on hold for about a year.
Coming and going. And we've actually got one in pitch for the Women of the Red Cross, Australian Red Cross, in partnership with the Red Cross. And so we'd love to tell that if that comes. We'll know about that shortly, and that'll be a magnificent story if we're funded for it and we can move that one forward, because it is another really interesting story.
Yeah.
And from a similar period of time as the Harbour Lights with the First World War.
And again, incredible women just sort of stepping up. And I suppose one of the themes of a lot of these projects is that where women have made a contribution in historically is in the sort of volunteer area, which has been not seen as not as lauded as people doing people who are doing professional work. So I mean, of course, there've been amazing professional women in history, in Victorian history as well, teachers and all sorts of people, but there's been a lot of just incredibly dedicated, competent volunteer women who just did amazing things throughout history, and the Red Cross is a really good example of that, starting with the First World War, where I digress. That's a whole other project. I'll tell you, we'll tune back in and we'll tell you the whole story of that one if that comes up. Suffice it to say, we really hope that one will come off.
Hopefully it will. And again, that just reinforces the whole idea that we have such a rich history which needs to be told, needs to be filmed, needs to be out there. And this is a great opportunity to make films about all this wonderful history that we have. And I suppose with the proliferation now of streaming platforms that are now out there, they're looking for content. So I can see that there could well be a ready-made market for films like this.
Yeah, hopefully it's storytelling in history is very challenging because, of course, you don't often have the actual protagonists to take you through the story, or you can't kind of be a fly on the wall. So it's a different style of storytelling that sometimes can be quite niche, but I think actually history is having a bit of renaissance at the moment. But yeah, it is fun to work in that space because you can't just go and grab some B-roll, can you, of something that happened 100 years ago. So you've got to be a bit more imaginative about how you're going to paint the picture of that time, which is one of the reasons why we like working in this space, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the best examples I have is of the Civil War in America, and Ken Burns, who was able, obviously there's no film footage or anything available, but was able to construct through photos and readings and all sorts of other information, voiceover, an excellent look at that history. And we can do this as well.
That's right,
Yeah, well, the whole Ken Burns,
his
style and influence has been incredible across the time. I've got a similar background to Ken Burns, being an animator, and so I was an animation camera operator, And so hence my interest in rostrum cameras and before that. But one film to look for, if you're interested in that sort of style, one that it certainly influenced Ken Burns, was City of Gold, which is a Canadian film about the gold rush in Canada, which is just second to none in absolute beautiful imagery.
Yes.
And they invented the process of, they actually hired a mathematician to do the camera moves, and they built a huge rostrum camera with giant images that would have been probably 6 foot by 4 foot, and they used mathematical computation to move the camera across the image. A very contemporary looking film, beautifully shot.
I think it's
with
about
beautiful live action.
1960 would have been.
Earlier, 50s
or 60s.
something. Yeah, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And Ken Burns talked about it. Wolfram, I think the guy's name is, the director, is 2 directors.
Won a Palme d'Or. It was a very influential film at the time.
It is astoundingly beautiful film. And that was that, that's the actual beginning of that, using rostrum camera to tell documentary storytelling. So
over these beautiful archival
over the
stills.
archival images. So reinventing a way to use a camera was traditionally used for screen printing and for. I worked as a screen printer as well with rostrum cameras years ago. So I've done a lot of work with that sort of physically moving camera. So hence the interest in using modern technology to do a similar concept. Certainly a lot easier with the modern technology, less dust.
Yes, I like that. City of Gold. I must see if I can find that somewhere. It sounds great.
Available on YouTube, I think. I think you'll find it on YouTube. Yeah, great. Yeah.
And of course, Ken Bird's an absolute very influential on us in beautiful storytelling.
Yeah, very, very beautiful. And importantly, I think, from my partner's point of view too, I always look at Ken Burns films and think, that's really great, but it's the researchers that are actually doing all the hard work. It's like 95% of these films are research, not the actual, sitting down with a camera or sitting down with a rostrum camera. It's actually the research. It's all those incredible images and the Dust Bowl, the images in the Dust Bowl. If you've seen that, the Ken Burns film, the black and white images from that period of time of the Depression and the Dust Bowl. Oh, what beautiful lighting and what beautiful images. You've got images like that to play with. You can essentially put them up in a slideshow and they're gorgeous. So and then some, the collection of all, trolling through all of those letters. Someone had to troll through all of those letters. You don't think of that, how many people, we get lots of people volunteering for us. And so, without them, we'll make a film and we've got probably 10, 20 people that are finding things for us. And, going through all those records and having such a love and an interest in it. And without them, there'd be no film, there'd be no story or anything else, because they're just so passionate about getting that story out there. And, Ken Burns will be relying on the same thing. It's just budgets are 30 or 40 times our size, or probably 200 times the size we've got. Less volunteers and more paid employees.
But you're absolutely right. That research element is so important in constructing any sort of film. All right. Well, great talking to you both. And just before I conclude, I always like to ask if you've seen anything recently, streaming, TV, anything at all that impressed you.
What am I watching? You asked me this last time and I answered with something quite frivolous. And I'm going to say what I'm watching at the moment it's a magical fantasy story set in the Napoleonic War era, and it's called Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and I'm enjoying it very much. Streaming adventure with magic.
Very good.
You're watching right?
I've been watching Ricky Gervais' his Afterlife, which is incredibly moving and quite dark, but at the same time pretty uplifting. But documentary-wise, the more fantastic Keith Richards documentary on
yes.
Netflix.
Yeah.
That I watched probably 2 or 3 nights ago. That's just beautiful, and it's lovely to see someone still so love music, have played it all their life and still be just as excited when you see him interact with other musicians, just how excited he still is just listening to someone play the blues. And he still reacts the same way as he seemed to react when he was 20. So to still love the genre, I think it's beautiful to see that sort of thing. Also, can't figure out how he plays when he's got such arthritic hands.
How interesting.
Absolutely knotted hands.
It was a lovely story,
It's
documentary story.
Really beautiful, really personal,
and traditional,
documentary.
lovely traditional, subject
Fly
centred,
on the wall,
subject
in the
centred.
recording studio and that sort of stuff. Subject centred.
Yeah.
Lovely interviews. Great cameos with Tom Waits too, which is always fun.
Okay, we'll look out for those. Sounds really interesting, and especially Harbour Lights, which is now screening as part of Short Sessions 4, as part of the Melbourne Documentary Film Festival online until the end of October. And Lucinda and Jary, thank you so much for talking with me.
You're welcome, Peter.
Absolute pleasure. Good to see you again.
All the best. Bye-bye.